Hello, game devs. In this video, we're going to talk about the responsibilities of working independently on creative tasks, honing our craft, and my take on how to act as a game developer in the office. So, fire up those TPS reports and let's game on. If this is your first job, especially if it's an entertainment job that there's a lot of ambiguity in like what is it that I'm doing and how do I track my time, game development doesn't exactly have a punch-in clock, but how do you figure out whether or not you're going to ship your game on time? Many companies use a variety of issue trackers like GitHub or Jira, which help keep track of what your boss is telling you to do, at least, from a high level. And offices might also use granular task tracking tools, something that you can like hit stop and play on via a widget or a phone app. These tools can feel really weird at first if you're not prepared for them or invasive or micromanagey, but they generally have a good purpose. Let's review my personal experience and where the bar is when you're working with me on a project. And I think this advice will serve you well in the corporate world. However, you may want to check your cultural norms in your organization, just to make sure you don't run afoul of someone who's thinking differently than me or just, a different policy. This is also not legal advice. You should refer to your corporate training for specific expectations. However, I think this should be helpful when trying to figure out those edge cases. Even if you aren't in a corporate setting or working on a project with me, keeping track of the tasks to the minute is still an important practice for veteran game developers, even working alone. In fact, if you're an independent developer, you're going to need a way to calculate the cost of a project before you do it, or you're going to be charging hourly. But either way, you're going to need to document that process. First step, though, find yourself an app that works for you. There are many integrations, and the system that you use depends on, what else you're also using, but even a pen and paper is fine if you're just working solo. But you should have a system down. And it should have a way of allowing you to add a task, hit play and pause, and then also edit the log entries, because, sometimes you leave it on all the time and you kind of forget. But that's literally it. Find your app of choice, add a task, and a time you estimate that it'll be done. Depending on if you are a student or if you're working full-time, you want to create tasks that are going to take you no longer than a single sitting. So 8 hours is for a professional, but usually I would break them down into 2-hour tasks. If this task is going to take longer than 8 hours, well, you should break it down into more subtasks. If you've got certain neurological differences, this may be a process that's familiar to you from your therapy sessions. It's just a good practice when you're looking at a big project. How do you break it down? Now that you've got your tasks listed and you're ready to go, right? Yes. So, when working, you need to accurately use the timer to reflect the time you're spending on the task, so not a rounded estimate. If someone is interrupting you during the middle of your task, you need to hit the pause button on your active task. You're not working on it. And here's actually where this comes into handy from a personal level. If you have someone who's distracting you at work, you can make a task saying like answering coworkers' questions, and you can then track that task as well. This allows you to actively communicate upwards the hidden tasks in development, so that other people can realize that what you're doing is valuable, but then also allow them to prioritize their communication with you while you're on the clock. Or maybe it points out that, phone call with mom seems to take up a significant portion of that hour, and you maybe shouldn't be considering charging your full hour of work if you're going to be on the phone the whole time, right? Like you wouldn't pay your doctor for the doctor's visit if they were on the phone call for half your visit, right? Task tracking also gives you a more accurate... Tracking tasks also gives you a more accurate information on the ability to estimate your tasks. Once you've gotten a few years behind your belt, it starts to build a bigger picture. For instance, I know that I can deliver a polished 2-page design document pitch without visuals in about 4 hours. Or take my buddy, a lead programmer. He noticed that in his data time, his estimated time and his actual time were about 50% off. It took him about half as long or half as much longer on most tasks as his gut feeling was telling him. So you know what we did? We told him, keep trusting your gut. But we built a modifier into the Excel sheet to calculate a more accurate number, and then that man didn't crunch the project, not nearly as much as he had in past projects. It really worked out for him. Now that you're tracking your tasks, you can accurately charge an hourly wage and you can submit your hours. In the university, you only have to put into the system hours per week worked. However, if you're working on a project with me, I'm expecting you to track your actual time spent. I'm not going to be evaluating that or judging it, but if my estimates are off and it's taking you more or less time than you expected, you need to check in with me or with your manager and ask them, are the quality of my tasks at or exceeding expectations? Am I meeting expectations of the task itself? Make sure you're doing everything to put your full attention towards the work that you're doing as well. Like, a Discord conversation might feel not that long, but those distractions, they can add up. And your time to compose those thoughts, it could eat up to 20% of an hour away if it's an intense conversation. So in an office setting, you're going to observe people using things to just, like cartoons or music or movies. Some they doodle during meetings. And I want to make a special note about work styles. Everyone is different, and they might use certain media to help them distract from the noisy pit environment. I knew an animator who kept The Simpsons on loop all day long, and it really helped him keep the distractions away from people who are talking over his cube. And I'm not here to judge specific methods, so whatever it is that keeps you focused is good, but investigate your personal needs and make sure that you're creating an environment that works for you. My lead programmer used to go bonkers when I leaned over the cubicle wall and asked him questions. But he was much more thrilled to deal with me when I texted him using AOL Instant Messenger, and we could complete those answers asynchronously. That allowed him to come to a complete stop on what he was doing and then focus on the task. It's even helpful as a student to use these tools to keep track of how long your homework might take. In my classes and projects, I provide estimates of how long I expect each task to take, but I'm also expecting you to work no more than 10 hours a week according to the university guidelines. So if something is taking you a long time, it may be good to seek help or communicate to your teacher that their demands might be out of alignment with the university expectations. Or maybe it just wasn't that clear and the lecture needs to be improved. A final note about playing games as part of our career. From my perspective, you should not clock hours for games you're playing unless it's a very specific game for a very specific purpose. I kind of hold it to the same standard that you might hold writing off a business meal for your taxes, which is a confusing topic, but you can find a lot of information on it. Because, do we eat for pleasure? Yes, but we can't write off a pleasure meal. We need to have a business meal that we need to document what it is that is the business purpose of that meal. So a game your boss told you to clone? Yeah. Or comic book that the Marvel character you have to make a game for, should you read those? Yes. You should probably mark that time down. That's, very direct research. However, as artists, it's also up to us to know and understand our medium outside of the work. Much like a musician needs to consume music or a writer needs to read a lot, this can also apply to training as well. We need to stay current on the tools and techniques of our personal trade. However, if your company is asking you to do a new task that isn't in your wheelhouse or on your job description, that time spent training is also something that, probably goes towards company time because they're trying to get you to do something you weren't going to be doing. All this is very gray area, but it's helpful in navigating the world and also being a good teammate to work with. You want to make sure that your output matches other people's output. Hopefully, this takes some of the cultural shock out of the task tracking tools that you're going to come across. And any company that's using it appropriately, they should use this as a guidance tool. They might provide guidance in a murky development cycle. At my old job, we had usually averaged about 4 hours of task time in a 8-hour day. That means that there's lots of meetings and other things that are going on. And that was actually considered good. But if my numbers dipped, my manager could use that as an opportunity to evaluate what's going on. Have I been in a lot of meetings that week that are not, tracked properly? Maybe people keep interrupting me. or maybe there's an invisible task eating up my time. But never did my managers use these as a cudgel. It wasn't like a punishment thing. But if that kind of thing is happening, sounds like you might have organizational issues that you might want to look for new work soon. But what tools and tips do you have to stay focused and organized? Do you have any good task tracking apps? Let me know, and I'll see you in class.